because I love the role that you played in history in sort of helping us get access to a little thing called cryptography. It's such a crucial and fundamental part of everything that we do today. It's hard to believe that somebody at one point in time had to fight for that right. Could you just take us back in time to before the moment that I'm alluding to, and tell us a little bit about this era when cryptography was classified by the U.S. government in the same category as nuclear secrets. Why did this happen? How did we end up in a world where cryptography and nuclear secrets were considered protected with the same legislation?
I think this is an area where technology's development kind of encroached upon something that had been envisioned as largely a military thing, right? Caesar had a cipher, right? You could probably even go back earlier and find people speaking in secret codes to each other. And anybody who's a historian of World War II knows that our ability to break the German codes with the Enigma machine was one of the turning points in the war. So, and we also broke the Japanese codes as well. So, so I think what really the reality is that our technology ended up encroaching on something that had been kind of largely a military thing. We know that Jefferson and Madison spoke to each other. Jefferson had his own cipher, and they spoke to each other in code when Jefferson was in Paris and Madison was here writing, some of the founding documents. So it's always had a political and again military role. What happened was, as we developed digital technology, it became clear that this technique of secret codes could be, used very well by computers, not a surprise, but that would really be a key to us having security and privacy in this digital age. And so I think the fact that it ended up on the U.S. munitions list next to surface-to-air missiles and nuclear weapons is not particularly surprising. I think what was hard was to convince the government that the rest of us needed encryption too.
So this is a long and fabulously interesting story. I want to ask you if you can try and condense it, because it's great to hear it in the people who were there's own words. In about 2 minutes, can you kind of just give an audience an overview of the role that you played in helping change that paradigm?
Well, I want to be really clear. There were a lot of people involved in changing that paradigm, but I was lucky enough to get asked by the Electronic Frontier Foundation to do a litigation challenge, to go to the courts and to try to convince the courts that we had to do a couple of things. The first thing we had to convince the courts of was that computer code was speech for purposes of the First Amendment, that coding was a rarefied language that we use to explain things to each other in a technical audience, but also to a computer, and to get a computer to execute on them. So once we did that, so we put together a lawsuit. I represented a guy by the name of Dan Bernstein, who's a cryptographer. He was a grad student at the time. He's now a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And a pretty famous cryptographer. But he wrote a really dumb little program called Snuffle that, if you're technical, I could explain what it does, but it's not a particularly insightful thing. And I would recommend, impact litigation around something that is going to change the world. You might want to think about a different strategy. But so we went to the government and we said, Dan wants to publish this thing on the internet. Can he do it? And the way the regulations work is you send a request into the government and then they might get back to you. So about a year later, he still didn't really get a response. And then we pushed and he got a no from them. And so we sued and we said, look, telling a professor that he can't publish code on the internet is a First Amendment problem. It requires you to meet the First Amendment standards, and these regulations aren't even close. And we won. The district court agreed. There were a lot of shenanigans along the way, but ultimately by the end of it, we were winning, and the government did kind of a slow surrender. So now, and it worked over time, but now you can use very strong encryption, and the government still, has a very light regulation where you have to email them, but otherwise that's why Zoom can be encrypted right now.
I love it.